is going on, everyone? Here we go for week 4. I got some previews on lock for you. Unfortunately, due to school this week, I've been a little bit busy. So unfortunately, we're not going to be covering every single 1 p.m. game today. We'll be previewing the Thursday night football game. We're going to be reviewing the Monday night football game and around 6 1 p.m. games. So we're going to do a little bit of a flip this week. Our Friday episode is going to be our big episode. Our Wednesday show today going to be a little bit shorter due to me just having a big amount of work on my plate, unfortunately, with school and other life events going on. But with that, I am your host, Matt McCarthy, here for Gridiron Ratings, your senior redraft analyst for the site. And oh boy, we got a bunch of good games to talk about. I wanted to give good fantasy analysis. So I didn't want to throw in every single game, especially some of the bigger games. There's a few games that we're going to cover today that we are kind of the throwaway ones, kind of the speed up, not too many good players in that. So we're going to dive right in. So we got to review that Monday night football game, Philadelphia versus Dallas. Unfortunately, not really go the way I was hoping that this one would play out. 62 points were scored in that game. That is good. But the ways they were scored were not particularly great. So one big thing was the Goddard breakout. One big thing for Dallas was the crap ribs going to be an issue for Amari Cooper. Good thing that nothing really came away from that in terms of Cooper's injury. And Goddard did have a good sort of showing, but not anything excellent, because this game was just kind of a disaster from the get-go. Really, on the Dallas side, the only two players that had good fantasy days that you started was Dak with the 3 touchdowns and Ezekiel Elliott scoring twice, and really showcased, for all intents and purposes, they trust their lead back to be Ezekiel Elliott, near 100 yards rushing in the game to go with the 2 scores. But back to that Philadelphia side, I'm very perplexed about the complete abandonment of the run game, which was very interesting to me. I didn't see any injuries noted for Sanders, and Gainwell got a lot of touches very late in the game, especially through the last few drives when the game was pretty much over. But Sanders just 2 carries for 27 yards, 4 targets, 3 receptions, 28 yards. I've seen people be extremely worried about Sanders. I understand why. In a game where we expect it to be pretty good scoring on both sides of the ball, this one pretty perplexed me. And running back has kind of been that way this year, where we're really going into it. It almost feels blind. You can have your best guesses about the position, and it seems to kind of play out in sort of wonky ways, especially for myself. Fantasy Pros ranker, as I've said before on the show. Quarterback, I've been on pretty well, 16th best ranker for quarterback position. Running back and tight end, though, I've not been nailing. Quarterback and receiver, I've done well, top 50 receiver, but running back has perplexed me, and tight end even more so. One of the not going to say one of the worst rankers on tight end, but I'm close to it. But it's just been an odd position, to say the least. Goddard, unfortunately, does not get the big breakout game. Zach Ertz scores in this, out targets Goddard. Goddard does come away with 66 yards in the contest. I was expecting earlier in the week that Zach Ertz would not be active for this game, but since he was, once again, we don't get a big amount of separation for the two for fantasy purposes, unfortunately, because if one guy was to be the guy, we at least be a little bit more safer in that sort of regard. But Sanders, back to him, played 35 of the possible 58 snaps in this game, so very odd to see that. It's not particularly something we can account for why he didn't get the work that he did, since he was on the field so often. Very strange to me. In order to the Cowboys side, the Dak sack fumble early on. We have, an underthrow from Hurts that led to an interception. The touchdowns that went the Dallas way was in all in odd spots through the air. Dalton Schultz scoring twice. Cedric Wilson through the air as well. The one thing we say with Schultz, I believe he's really opened the margin about which is going to be the really primary tight end for Dallas. When Michael Gallup comes back, whenever that may be, it does affect those two players regardless. So I can't say that, Schultz is going to be a top 12, 15, whatever sort of option for you all year long. But right now, Schultz leading in targets, receptions, and yards, 15, 14, 143, and 2 scores from this game. Schultz, 9 targets, 8 receptions, 71 yards, no scores, unfortunately, for Jarwin through the 3 weeks. Otherwise than that, CeeDee Lamb does get down at the 1. Ezekiel scores a short while later, or that might have been the one where they get turned over from the. It seemed like a very obvious score. A lot of weird stuff happened this game, but not worried about Lamb, not worried about Cooper. him, especially Cooper, not coming away with any sort of more complications from the rib injury. So we're going to be thinking about these guys, the same top 15 sort of receivers that we'll be looking at all year long. Game with Carolina. I believe we're going to be talking about that game on Friday. So let's start previewing the game, starting off with the Thursday night football game, Jacksonville versus Cincinnati. Cincinnati favored by 7.5 points, 46-point over-under. Get up with the Jacksonville side. One big thing for them, definitely working off of that Robinson touch workload from last week. Robinson had a bad running back position, very nearly a top 15 running back for me here in week 4. If they can continue to feature him in the receiving game from his 2020 numbers, 41% of his fantasy points came from his receiving work. So we want to see him still being involved in that regard. If we're not going to have the receiving work to go along with the rushing, I do think he's going to be able to pick up a good amount of yardage, not maybe anything ridiculous on the ground here in week 4. But if he gets the receiving work to go alongside that, that's going to get him to have a better fantasy day. Just outside my top 15, but I think he's a very strong RB2 option here in week 4. Outside of him, Marvin Jones is the only receiver I'll have in my top 36 out of Jacksonville. It's an unfortunate spot. We're seeing a good amount of work given up to 2 players last week from Pittsburgh, Claypool and Najee Harris, which also gives sort of a right spot to James Robinson. I don't think he's going to have the 19 targets that Najee Harris had, but Jones definitely through this first 3 weeks, the Jacksonville receiver we can have the least more confidence in. DJ Chark did score last week. If I were to rank the 3 right now, it would go Jones in my top 35, Chark around 40 or so, and then Laviska Shenault around 50. My ranks available through my Twitter at Methodical1. You can see at the bottom of the screen. There's a pinned link always in there. You can go to the particular scoring setting you are looking for through that link. Moving on to the Cincinnati side. The Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase real connection has been real. Still need to see what's going to look like when T. Higgins comes back, who will be inactive for this game. So Chase is going to be a top 15 receiver for me. Tyler Boyd is going to be a top 30. Chase, for me, I think the ridiculously high ranking is warranted. Only 2 players in the NFL have more touchdowns currently than him, which would be Cooper Kupp and Aaron Jones. But these deep passing touchdowns have been occurring apparently on a weekly basis. 34-yard touchdown score in week 3, 42 yards in week 2, and a 50-yard score in week 1 against Minnesota. If he continues to have big downfield home run threat sort of situations week to week, even with Higgins coming back, if they still want to look to see him as a deep ball threat, if they're connecting on him like they are currently, that is very, very valuable to have in Jamar Chase. It's very rare. We just got off of Justin Jefferson last year as a top sort of receiver, and another rookie stepping into as a top 5 receiver currently in points scored through 5 weeks. It's nice to see, especially again after the drop issues that were apparently a big bugaboo going into 2021's regular season. But for right now, we're very, very happy what we're getting out of him. Joe Mixon, though, one big thing, top 5 for me here against Jacksonville in week 4. And last year, this was the big matchup he had. 151 rushing yards, 3 total scores, 6 receptions for 30 yards, over a 40-point fantasy game. Joe Mixon's big workload numbers came from this game against Jacksonville last year. A good amount of his fantasy points were out of this one contest in the 2020 season. There's not many players with better matchups on paper right now for week 4. And if this game in a Thursday night football sort of situation, which always favors the run game, considering the passing is not really going to be anything you can really plan too much for on a short week. If Mixon continues to see these big rushing numbers and continues to see very little workload out of the secondary running backs, no running backs have had a carry in both weeks 2 and week 3. I would like to see Joe Mixon finish out as a top 5 running back like I'm ranking him, because I'm not particularly taking a big leap on this one, a pretty consensus top 12 running back on the week. But I like to see that we can have more confidence in Mixon getting more receiving work. It hasn't really had double receptions since that first week. I would like to see a little bit more of that. But even if it just works all off the rushing yards, I do think he has a good chance to be very productive in this game against Jacksonville. Cincinnati defense, the last point in note, I think is one of the streamer options this week. Them and the Tennessee Titans against New York Jets is the other one. 7 total interceptions, less than 220 passing yards for Jacksonville, and only 1 score in the last 2 games. The only one that did not occur was the Houston game when they were in super mega ultra garbage time. The Jacksonville Jaguars, like to see the Cincinnati Bengals be able to contain them here on Thursday night. Moving on to Washington versus Atlanta, and I do have a little bit of an issue with the spread in this game. Washington's only favored by 1.5 points, 48-point over under. That seems a little low. I understand that the Falcons are coming off a win, but it takes the 1980s style playbook that the New York Giants run out there for them to really get a last second field goal win against New York. So I'd like to see a big bounce back for McLaurin, big bounce back for Gibson. He did have that 73-yard reception, 73-yard receiving touch. Oh man, that was a tongue twister there. But both of them, big bounce back spots, both top 12 options at their respective position. Taylor Heineke, for some reason, let's say you're really struggling at quarterback or in a 2-quarterback league. Heineke, I think, is a top 18 option, I think, in week 4. This is what happens when you do 2 shows back to back. But I'm not really buying the defensive performance from Atlanta in week 3. I think it's more of a Giants issue than an Atlanta defense showcasing that they are a strong defensive unit. The only one thing, Curtis Samuel, he is practicing. I don't think he's going to be active for this game, but there is a chance if he is. The one I think that'd be the most detriment to would be Logan Thomas. I like Logan Thomas quite a bit in this one. Has scored in 2 of the last 3 games. The yardage isn't great. 4 receptions, 2 of the 3. That's good enough for big. That's big numbers for a tight end, though. Currently, my tight end 7. That would drop a few spots if Curtis Samuel's active. It would also remove guys like Adam Humphries from consideration as a lower receiving option for sure. Moving on to, and actually that was my one big thing would be if Samuel's active again, if that comes to fruition. Over to Atlanta though. I don't have a lot of optimism for this Atlanta offense currently. So talked a little bit on the recap show from Monday, but low is an ADOT for both Ridley and Ryan. No completion so far of 20 air yards through 3 weeks. Ridley has 3 yards lower in his average yards per target at 6 currently from 9 for his career average. And they've only attempted 3 such passes of 20 yards as well. They're not looking downfield. They're not able to, or they're not calling it, but possibly both. But we don't have those big home runs occurring right now, and it's making the offense pretty stagnant. I understand losing Julio Jones does affect your offense. We would have thought they supplanted that with a supposed top 5 pick in Kyle Pitts, the big difference maker they'd make over that at tight end. With Gage hurt, we have a little bit of worry with Pitts of how, coming along very early in his rookie season. But not a lot of very good things going on with Atlanta. And really, it's a real point of note for me. I have him currently as my wide receiver 18. Some players I would prefer to start from over Calvin Ridley here in week 4. Jamar Chase, Chris Godwin, Deebo Samuel, and Adam Thielen. Guys like Mike Evans and Brandon Cooks, I am considering it as well. There's not really a big warrant to just say Ridley is a must-start top 5 option in a matchup like this and in how the offense is currently playing. If he goes out and produces, great. This is what we drafted him to do so. But with these ranks, I'm going to go off of what what's before me. And currently Ridley is not performing like a top 5 receiver. Atlanta is not performing like a top quality offense. So for me, it's going to have his rank suffer. Kyle Pitts outside the top 6, but tight end being what it is. Currently, my tight end 8, Rob Gronkowski, Logan Thomas, I would be starting over him if those were options on your team, especially Gronk. If Gronk doesn't score, I'd be pretty genuinely surprised for sure. But so also with the running backs for Atlanta, Patterson and Davis, I do have them back-to-back currently in my running back spots. Patterson, if you have him as it depends on the site. If he's a receiver, like that less. If he's a running back, I like that more. Currently, they are back-to-back at 28 and 29 in my running back ranks, and there's some wiggle room for that for sure. But Patterson is showcasing that if you were to move players to different positions, their values would change. Some people wanted Kyle Pitts as a receiver, earlier in the in the season or in the preseason. If he was a receiver, Kyle Pitts would be dropped. He's only valuable because he is a tight end. So the showcase that this is a very prime example. If you start messing around with the positions, certain players gain or lose value depending on where they are slotted. He is a receiver playing running back. That makes him valuable. If he ended up being if he got listed as a tight end, he's probably like a top 5 or 6 option weekly, considering what the position is for sure. Moving on to the Tennessee versus New York Jets. Tennessee favored by 7.5, 46-point over under. One big thing here, as this game is going to be pretty quick, right? We're going to really see if the New York Jets are the team to stream against here, as a big test for a Tennessee defense that I have not a particularly great amount of confidence in, but the New York Jets offense through 3 weeks only has 20 total points. So something really to worry about. On the Jets side, starting no one with really any sort of confidence. Michael Carter and Corey Davis, though, we're going to watch closely versus Tennessee, who has allowed the 8th most points currently. A good portion of that came from the Seattle Seahawks game, with under 200 yards passing allowed in the other 2 games. But if we do see good to fine games out of either of them, it at least gives us more confidence that in softer matchups they've played some, New England, they've played Carolina. This has been a pretty tumultuous start. Denver, pretty tumultuous start for New York Jets to start the season. Hopefully, with a technically softer matchup in the Tennessee Titans defense, they can at least score multiple touchdowns again, because they only did that one time. So let's see what happens. Over to the Tennessee side, though, we do have some injuries we got to keep a note of. AJ Brown, a good possibility to miss this game, and if Julio Jones misses as well, it thrusts Nick, last name is Westbrook Akine, I'm going to go with that, and Chester Rogers into bigger roles. Prefer Westbrook Akine, played 78% of the snaps to Rogers 41%, with Jones and Brown missing good portions of the second half in week 3. But what really all boils down to is Ryan Tannehill will not be a top 15 option for me. Quarterbacks that I am preferring to start Ryan Tannehill in week 4. Joe Burrow on Thursday Night Football, Jimmy Garoppolo, Sam Darnold, Kirk Cousins, and Derek Carr, all options possibly on your waiver wire or on your bench that I prefer to start over Ryan Tannehill here in week 4. So really also with that, it's pretty much just de facto Derrick Henry week, right? I don't really I struggle to really think of a player I prefer to start in a straight up situation at running back, receiver, or tight end than Derrick Henry. The yardage numbers, the carry numbers are going to be pretty high. You're kind of just hoping the Jets can stop one guy. I don't know if they can. I have faith in this coaching staff that if they're looking at this, they're going to have to try and be beat by one guy. I don't think this is going to be a very particularly high scoring game. Half that be on the Jets, half that with Brown and Jones are to miss. It's really just Derrick Henry, and rushing slows the game down. So Derrick Henry, the top for both running back and flex this week, but really just a gross game for sure. Speaking of gross games, Houston versus Buffalo. Buffalo favored by a season high so far, 16.5. 47-point over under. One big thing for the Houston side, it's Cooks. And Cooks has felt matchup proof, but boom, we get the Buffalo Bills. Currently the second worst matchup for opposing wide receivers. Only LA Chargers and Philadelphia Eagles have allowed fewer yards on the season, and one of 4 teams to only allow only 1 touchdown to wide receivers, that being the Las Vegas Raiders, the Los Angeles Rams, and the New York Jets, oddly enough. Cooks is a sole player worth starting this game on the Houston side, with the real question being, how high is too high? He's looking as a wide receiver 20 to 30 range, just really just how he's falling on Fantasy Pros. And I look at my fellow rankers, I understand some people are really more favoring on him to just being a matchup proof sort of guy, with just, if there's one way of production they're going to look from yards, and we saw that in a Thursday Night Football game, it's Cooks on any drive that he's their first option. Is he open? Cool, throw it home. If he's not, we're in trouble. But the Pittsburgh trio, McLaurin, Waddle, have all combined for 1 score on this Buffalo pass defense. If Tre'Davious White is on him, if they just stick him, just follow him around, I'm more worried on Cooks. He's a very talented receiver. Davis Mills, I'd say he's a gutsy guy for the hits he took in that Carolina game. But this one seems like it's going to be a big issue of staying close. And if it does, excellent. But I don't really ever see that happening because on Buffalo, Allen, the receivers, Dawson Knox, the running backs are all in good spots. It's really going to come down to a spot of, does your guy score? Now, Allen, top 2 quarterback, Diggs, top 5 receiver. So they come to the other guys. Both Beasley and Sanders are going to be my top 35. Prefer Beasley to Sanders, both great. You're hoping that anyone you start here scores because if it starts to get to be a crazy contest and this one goes to be kind of gross, it really just turns to the running backs possibly is the only ones getting in on the fun. So you're hoping that whoever scores early, it's your guy. Dawson Knox, currently a top 8 tight end on the season. I looked on Twitter. A lot of people were saying today he's just been getting it in crazy ways, touchdowns and not a lot of targets, not a lot of work. That's all fine and dandy. The position sucks, and this is a matchup against the Houston Texans. If he doesn't work out, okay. 90% of the tight ends don't work on a weekly basis, so I'm fine with it because the guys who really are successful at the position outside of, Kelsey Waller, Andrews, all the big guys, is really just down to a case of who scores a touchdown. So Dawson Knox in a game where I think Buffalo's going to be scoring as many points as they particularly feel like it. It's a top 12 option for me. So what are you going to do? Start over guys like Robert Tonyan, Mike Gesicki. Prefer him to those guys this week. So one big thing is the running backs. So Devin Singletary, Zach Moss, back-to-back my ranks. That is a cowardice on my part. But do we really particularly know who's going to be getting the work when this game gets out of hand or when this game is even competitive? We have no idea. Zach Moss was inactive for week 1, had 10 touches in week 2 and scored 2 touchdowns, and then was a better running back in week 3. It's going to be an issue for me as to who is going to be the primary back, who's going to be in the scoring situations. If you start either of them, it's high risk, high reward as a flex or low RB2 option. And that's really the kind of the matter for the entire game. Because that's how Allen and Diggs, and I guess Knox, because he's a tight end, who kind of cares. But all the guys are going to be, if they score for you, if they're involved early when the game is still competitive, you're going to love the production they get out of it. Let's say the first drive, Emmanuel Sanders scores on a 60-yard touchdown pass. Well, that's kind of a disaster scenario because you want to be able to pick up receptions and pick up yards in incremental ways. The longer this game kind of gets dragged out, we don't want 3 touchdowns scored in the first quarter. That's how this game becomes gross, and that's how Buffalo doesn't get great fantasy days outside of possibly Josh Allen if he's the one throwing all those touchdowns. The receivers and the other players, you really wanted this game to go a little bit longer. Don't pile on all at the first in the first quarter. Make this game be competitive for 4 quarters. Few games left. I'm gonna get one of the crappier games out of the way because we only have 3 games left to talk about. New York Giants versus New Orleans Saints. New Orleans favored by 8. One of the lowest point over-unders on the week at 43. Only Kamara, Barkley, and the Saints defense are really starting for me. With Galladay as a flex, Callaway as a lower flex. This game sucks. This game's gross. I really struggle to see so unfortunately, Daniel Jones only has 1 fumble here, no interceptions. There's a possibility that this becomes the implode game in New Orleans. Kenny Golladay, by proxy, is a top 36 receiver. If Sterling Shepard is active, we're going to lower that for sure. Currently, I do have him in my ranks, but he's all the way down at the bottom because I don't know if he's actually going to play in this one. Evan Ingram, I'm not starting. Daniel Jones, I would like not to start at all, even in a 2-quarterback situation. And over on the New Orleans side, I don't know if Jameis Winston's ever going to throw for more than like 250 yards because we have back-to-back weeks of like under 150. That's hurting this entire team. Again, they don't have a lot of offensive production on New Orleans outside of Kamara. So Callaway and the rest of the funky bunch, if they ever start, really trying, push the offensive envelope, fine. But For right now, Winston is not losing them games, so which is all they really want him to do. And they don't have all their weapons. Without Thomas and without Traquan Smith, this team is a lot worse on paper. This is not a good offensive team. This is not the New Orleans Saints of old. You're not going to have big offensive games. The New Orleans Saints defense is good. I think there's a good defensive option here for New Orleans. And honestly, if you're in a bad spot, the Giants defense might be in a good spot as well. I don't expect a lot of points scored in this game. I think it's going to be a low scoring affair for sure. So moving on, Carolina versus Dallas. One of those pretty easy games on paper. I'm going to start with the Carolina side, which is for sure just an easy sort of spot. One big thing for them is Chuba Hubbard. If you got Chuba off of waivers, congratulations. You have a top 20 running back for week 4. Again, how much fab you spent is how much you're trying to pick up a win here in week 4, because McCaffrey has not been put on IR. He is technically, I don't believe, been ruled out for this week. So that's just something of note. Could be back next week, could be back the week after. But if he was going to be gone for these 2 games and the one after, he would have probably gone on IR. So we're going to see him sooner rather than later. But more in Hubbard, the only real safe starts. Sam Darnold is a top 15 option here. Currently sits as QB 12 on the season with 22 quarterbacks and more passing touchdowns, but is tied with Kyler Murray for the league lead with 3 rushing touchdowns. He has a preferred option. It's DJ Moore. It's Moore all day. Robbie Anderson, and I'm hesitant to say he's a flat sit, because in this game scenario, the real competition that, the first competition that Carolina has had with Houston, New York Jets, and that weird New Orleans Saints week, Anderson bouncing back here would make too much sense. So I'm not going to put him like outside of my top, 45 or so, 50. We were talking about this on Off the Grid with John June earlier in the day. Anderson, I'm not pushing the envelope, putting him as a top 36 or 24 option or anything like that. But if they were ever going to see a spot where he were to produce like the Robbie Anderson we would want him to be, it would be here against Dallas. In a game where, Dallas is trying to take control of their division. Carolina is undefeated. This is one of the games you want to see your players kind of show up and produce. And I understand that DJ Moore is, a top 12 option for me. Let's see where I got DJ Moore. Yeah, top 6 with just the amount of work that he's been getting. I'm actually starting him over either of the Dallas Cowboys receivers. All 3 are kind of knocking in on or are top 12 options in this one. But Anderson, if he were to bounce back, would make almost too much sense. On the Dallas side, it's pretty simple for the main crew. Dak, great. Zeke, great. Both receivers near top 12. So it's really Dalton Schultz and Tony Pollard we need to talk about. Schultz, again, we talked early in the review of the Dallas Monday night game. I believe it's taking control of the 2 tight ends, push him to be a top 15 option for me. Whether that means you're starting or not, still technically in a normal 12-team league, not a start, but not every single league is the same sort of scenario going on. So for me, at least there's some sort of confidence you could be starting him with some sort of meaningful production. Just don't expect any of the 2 touchdown game nonsense like he just had. I think that's a little bit too above the bar for him. Tony Pollard, he's a running back in a fine position. I would still be starting him over, I think, Damian Harris. I do not like that Tampa Bay game. Cordero Patterson and Mike Davis are the tough ones, because if they're going to get the receiving work against Washington, that makes them more valuable in a PPR format. So Pollard, for where he's ranking for you, I think kind of matches up to where you're looking at him in your scoring system. Curious to see where my fellow rankers have him. Yeah, just a few in the top 24, but mostly in the mid to low 30s, some 40s. Not everyone's really sort of prioritizing this week, which is understandable. Last week was supposed to be the big Tony Pollard top 24 game. He's just a fine option if he gets the involvement he saw maybe in week 2. We're going to be kind of flip-flopping with him, but we liked what he saw in week 2. I think that was more possible of the Gallup situation being out and him getting more work just as a overall player for them. Last week, again, the Monday Night Football game was weird and how that one all played out. Very curious to see how that actually works out against a technical good defense in Carolina. Moving on to the last game of the day. Again, we were talking about it's going to be a shorter episode, going to be a long one on Friday. Detroit versus Chicago. Chicago is favored currently by 3. This is the lowest over-under total at 42.5. We're going to start on the Detroit side. one big thing. I want to talk about DeAndre Swift, his outlook rest of season. Because I think he's possibly a matchup-proof running back. With the amount of receptions he's getting, currently only second to Najee Harris because he had, a 19-target game against Cincinnati because Big Ben could not move the ball downfield and he lost all his receivers regardless. But with his receiving work, it's going to be very tough for me to not rank DeAndre Swift as a weekly top 12 option in PPR formats like I do. Because again, we're trying to get what is really valuable for running backs. He could pick up 3 yards. But a reception in full PPR for 3 yards is like he ran for 13. And it's much harder to run for 13 yards than to catch a ball for 3. Just showcases how valuable it is for running backs and the dual, stats that they pick up. Just how much work they really pick up when they start catching passes. Well, we like guys like Eckler. We like guys like Saquon Barkley in the back. And DeAndre Swift, in the past. And DeAndre Swift here, this is what we like. We want to see big receiving totals. You want to see him be a main focus of this offense like he was against Baltimore in a game they unfortunately lost because of a crazy, record-breaking field goal. For the Detroit side, though, Hockenson, Swift, Williams are the only options for me. Hockenson, I like to see a little bit of a bounce-back sort of situation against the Chicago Bears. Otherwise, the receiving options, I'm still not particularly set on because I think they're going to change week to week. Khalif Raymond with 10 targets. Cool. This receiving core is way too much of a toss-up for me to recommend any of them as very safe options. We're still not at the buys, and you shouldn't be this far down the list at receivers in a normal redraft league that these are options you're looking for to fill your receiver or flex spots. Over to Chicago. So Matt Nagy has not announced a quarterback for week 4. Justin Fields has a hand injury. We still have Dalton out. Nick Foles is on the roster. Well, in his first start, Justin Fields, I was looking to see what the rookie sack record was. He had 9. I was told that Greg McElroy had 13. So that's what we were looking at over there in week 3. It's crazy. I was a top 20 ranker for quarterbacks with the Fields call. Fields over Allen was very much a funny one. But Chicago, the rankings I currently have for David Montgomery and Allen Robinson. Montgomery I think a very good matchup for him against Detroit. I think if it's the field situation again, they can't move the ball well, he will be at running back 20. But with Dalton or possibly, Foles under center, at least we've seen that they are NFL quality quarterbacks in the past at one point or another. Running back 14 or so, I really like this Detroit matchup. I don't like, with the Baltimore Ravens where they were just unknowingly just mixing around their running backs and not giving good work. David Montgomery is a good running back. This is a good matchup. If they can move the offense with any sort of certainty, this should be a good fantasy performance for him. It's just a matter of, are we going to have a good game out of this team? Allen Robinson, unfortunately, does account a little bit more to he needs a good, solid quarterback under center. The highest I'd put him is probably running a receiver 22. But you can possibly see him, as behind I'd still start him with Tyler Boyd. So that's receiver 29. And he can move. Again, this is a good matchup. I'm just very worried about Allen Robinson. And I'm actually curious to see where he is ranked by my fellow rankers as well. Because this one is, I'm actually a low guy on him at 22. Lowest ranking in the 30s and 40s or so. We have some people pushing him as a top 12 option, which he really should be. This is a great matchup. It's just a matter of I don't know what the quarterback play is going to be. I'm just overly worried about what this team is going to look like. He has not particularly had a great start to the season. His season high in fantasy points has been 10. If there's some buy low targets out there, Allen Robinson has got to be top of the list, just with a bullet for sure. Cole Kmet, I think you can get away from not a player I'd be looking to start, and neither is Darnell Mooney. So with that, again, shorter episode today, longer episode on Friday. But if it's the first time, the last time that you spent your time with me, I appreciate it. I have been Matt McCarthy here for Gridiron Ratings. Again, 3 days a week, Monday, Wednesday, Friday. I'm here breaking down, previewing, reviewing all the NFL games. We got the Off the Grid on Wednesdays at 5:30, Tuesdays and Thursdays getting defensive with Gary and the crew. The slate on the weekend with Kyle and sometimes Jeff if he gets out of his hovel. So we're going to have some fun, hopefully, in week 4. And with that, I'll be signing off. So I'll be seeing you guys on Friday. Good luck in the Thursday night game. And hopefully we have some good quarterback play out of a few of these teams this week. Some bad games last week. So see you on Friday.